And Honolulu prosecutor Steve Alm is joining us to give us an update on crime in the city. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suchi and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Aloha, thanks for tuning in here to Spotlight Now on Hawaii News Now. Again, we are going to begin this conversation here today talking about the proposed landfill on Oahu. This is something that has made headlines and has gotten a lot of attention. We know a lot of you have questions and comments on it, and we always like to engage our viewers watching, so you can always scan this QR code to participate in the conversation or enter your comments into the Facebook section of our page at Hawaii News Now.
And we want to get right to our first guest, who is Roger Babcock, head of the city's Department of Environmental Services. Roger, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So it has been about a week since you made the announcement on the proposed site. Tell us a little bit about why you chose to put this in central Oahu, why you think this is the best location.
Yeah, thanks. So, as you know, I think we had a landfill advisory committee that formed in 2021 and worked through 2022, appointed by the mayor to sort of continue the looking for a suitable site for the next landfill. There were previous efforts in 2012 and 2017 that were not successful, and Waimanalo Gulch landfill was extended at that time. We had some deadlines of identifying a new landfill site by 2022, December 31st, and closing the landfill and opening a new one by 2028. We were unable to finish that process, but the Landfill Advisory Committee did identify 6 sites. We looked at 6 sites, and of these 6 sites, this one is the best for various reasons. Sort of its remote location, away from people and homes, its location not in a well capture zone for drinking water wells, a location right next to a major highway for good access, and basically, those are the main reasons why. It has a nice flat topography. It's an easy place to do construction.
There obviously are some concerns about the impacts that this could have to Oahu's water supply, and we're going to have Ernie Lau on in just a few moments to speak to some of that. But what has been the city's response to some of those concerns about the impact of having something like this over a aquifer that the city relies on as well?
Yeah, so aquifers are under all of the island, and landfills have a lot of are highly regulated by the EPA and the State Department of Health, and there's a lot of protections associated with design and operation of landfills to prevent contamination of either underlying soils and water, as well as surface, the community and stuff like that. So there are many protections, available to be able to do that. And I know there's a lot of concern, and we share the concerns for our water supply. It's critical importance. But we do feel that there are protective measures that will safeguard that. And a landfill is very different from an underground fuel storage tank.
Okay, let's expand a little bit on that. Lawmakers are already saying that they want to introduce legislation that would essentially make it impossible for you to move forward with this project. What are the conversations that you're having right now with folks like Senator Quinlan and other people who feel that this is not the appropriate place?
Yeah, so specifically, I think our job is to do a good job of community outreach and public education about what a landfill really is, how it works, and what the protections are. And really one of the best ways to do that is to go and visit our existing landfill. And I think maybe you folks have been there and you've seen video of it, and it's not really what people expect at all. I think a lot of times if you were to drive there and go up in the landfill, folks ask, well, where's the landfill? Did I miss it? Because there's not piles of trash and rubbish. The main thing that goes into the landfill is ash, which looks like gray dirt. And I think it's very different from what's in your gray cart that goes to H Power and is burned, and it's just the residuals that go there. And there's also, I think, folks need to understand how the protections, and so there's a liner system involved, and I'd be happy to talk more about that with if you like.
Yeah, let's maybe get into some of that too, because I think that there is a general concern out there by the public about what this could potentially mean for the community. So what are some of these additional safeguards that you feel confident about this site, knowing that there are these measures in place that you're saying will ensure the safety of not only the aquifer, but the surrounding community?
Yeah. So again, a landfill is a highly regulated facility, and it has protections to protect the groundwater, the underlying soil, and things like that. And then in terms of the surface, there's operating procedures, which daily cover, for example, to prevent blowing of materials. There's monitoring wells to make sure that there isn't leaks. There's monitoring of gases as well, like methane and odors that have to happen. And but the main thing with protection of the groundwater has to do with the liner system. And so what's required by federal law is a liner system that is shown here, and hopefully you can kind of see that. There's 3 components to this liner. This is called a drainage mat. That's on top of a thick plastic liner, and this is showing the weld, how it's rolled out, and that's on top of a clay liner. So these 2 are impermeable to water, and this is where water that's infiltrating down through the landfill is directed, and then it's directed to a low point called a sump, and the material that's infiltrating is called leachate. And so anything that ends up here is called leachate, and that would then flow to a collection sump. And what we do is we continuously pump out from that collection sump. So it's not a big storage tank full of this liquid called leachate, which is not good stuff, leachate. We pump that out continuously, we put it in trucks, and we take it to our wastewater treatment plant. And by regulation, we're not allowed to have more than 12 inches of leachate in the sump. So, in a lot of ways, there really isn't anything to leak out of a landfill. And I did just want to point out that I made 2 sandwiches of this, because what we've proposed is to do a double liner system. So this thing with these 3 pieces is considered a single liner, and then if you double that up, then that's a double liner. And the idea is that there would be 2 separate sets of sumps, and there'd be one associated with the lower liner. And if water ever appeared there, we would know that in the very, very unlikely event that the top liner had been compromised, and then we could take remedial actions.
There has been pushback already, in that initial press conference from Ernie Lau, and then we've seen it with lawmakers subsequently, the community saying that this is not something that they want. If not here, then where?
Yeah, so really nobody wants a landfill near them. And I just want to point out, this is in terms of this location, nobody could see this site from their house. If you drive out there, it's pretty far away. If in the old days before there were cell phones and you ran out of gas out there, you'd have a really long walk, to find somebody for help, and so people can't see it. But in terms of what are the other choices, even specifically for this site, Dole has indicated they want, we want to start talking to them, and they have 2,636 acres in this parcel. We're looking for 150 acres, and they said that this might interfere with their pineapple production, this exact site. But we want to talk to them if there's any other place on their land that they'd be interested in. But if laws are passed to eliminate the entire interior part of the island, and there's only the fringe around the outside, we've already know that there are no other sites available that meet any of the other restrictions. So we have a tsunami inundation zone, we have a half-mile buffer between any residence, school, or hospital, and we have no conservation lands available. There are some military plots out there, and as you know, we looked into those, and the military said, no, you can't use those sites. So in that event, then the only thing would be to modify the existing restrictions, the state level ones, which are those buffer zones and the conservation district. So if one of those can be modified, then some additional sites become available. But that would be very challenging, because that would mean that you would have to decide that, well, the buffers are not needed, or they could be reduced. And those restrictions are statewide. They're not just Oahu. So they would also impact other islands, including if we decide about the aquifers, that would also impact other islands. So there is a lot of things to think about with respect to that legislation. So I'm sure that the discussion and the testimony will be very robust, and we will of course be part of that. If both of those things are stand, then we would just probably have to stay at Waimanalo Gulch landfill and expand it.
Let's talk a little bit about that Act 73, which you're referencing to, the restrictions that are placed within a half mile of those buffer zones that you said with schools and such. Again, this is a topic that has engaged many in the community, including lawmakers, and Senator Favela actually has gone on record and has made a comment saying that he feels like this is a political deployment to try to pressure legislation to adjust Act 73. Is that at all, is there any truth to that this site was proposed because you knew of the pushback that was going to happen, and thus modifications would need to be made to this act?
No. Our intent is that we feel like this is a very good site, and that we can, with full confidence, build a landfill there that will be protective of the groundwater as well as the surface and the communities. Again, there are landfills, all over the country. Very, very strict regulations on what to do, and those things are protective of both the underlying, the subsurface and the surface, and we feel confident about that.
You mentioned the possibility of expanding the current landfill. That community has said for many, many years that they are done hosting this site. Do you think that it could come to that? And if it did, how much life is left in that site? How much longer could we actually use it?
Yeah, so again, that is definitely, we outlined 3 paths. This is the first path, our first choice, what we want to do. Second path is trying to work on Act 73. Third path is we have to stay there and expand it. In its currently permitted area, which is about 200 acres, we have about perhaps 10 years remaining of existing capacity. We're not permitted for 10 years. We're only permitted through 2028. And so that would require going back and hearings and all kinds of things to try to if it became necessary, to justify that. Beyond that, the existing site is not really expandable. We'd need to expand an adjacent area, which does also meet, it meets Act 73, and it is not in the no-pass zone.
How do you feel that this will impact the surrounding communities of Wahiawa, Mililani, the areas that border where this proposed site is, whether it be through just the environment, traffic, with trucks going in? There are some concerns for those who live in these communities who will no doubt express these types of concerns. What would be your thoughts and the city's response to some of those issues that might come up?
Yeah, thanks. So I think that there's various potential impacts, and that's part of the environmental impact study. And what happens there will be a traffic study, and it will undoubtedly recommend widening of the road in the area, providing left turn lanes, and it may even, and merging lanes and things like that, to accommodate the turning of slower vehicles, right, large trucks. And so that certainly would be there. It's unclear whether it would require a signalization or something like that, but that is potentially possible as well. So I'm sure that the traffic impacts can be mitigated. Just so folks know, there's about 300 trucks go to H-Power every day. However, only 20 ash trucks go to the landfill each day. There are some additional trucks that also go there each day with non-burnable stuff. So we do bury some other things that are non-burnables that are not permitted to burn. And as well as householders are also able to go to the landfill on some certain situations. So altogether, about 40 trucks. Some of those are pickup trucks, 10 of them, and some of them are other trucks, and 20 of them are ash trucks. So it's actually, an ash truck every 30 minutes. There really aren't lines, ever on Farrington Highway, because we would provide a place off of the road where trucks can queue up if necessary. So there'd be a processing area where there's a scale house and we have bulldozers and other equipment, that's on the site. So the landfill itself is only 90 acres, the size, the pile and the ash. Then we need 150 acres. The rest is processing area, buffer. We would provide screening for, with plants and trees and berms so that it wouldn't be visible from the road.
I want to bring in the audience, and we appreciate those of you who are writing in this afternoon. Raquel has a question. She says, why risk this over an aquifer after everything we have faced with Red Hill? The landfill is shrouded out because it's toxic. There's very serious risk. So just for some context, because I think Red Hill has given us all an awareness, the incident there, of what can happen when, something is built over a water source and things go wrong. In that case, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that those tanks sat about 100 feet over the water source. In this case, we're talking 800 feet. What do you see as some of the key differences? What would you say to someone like Raquel, who has this, very visceral reaction to this particular site?
Right. And so, if we didn't have to site over the aquifer, we wouldn't, right? It would be, that gives you zero risk. But there are a lot of activities that we do that have risk, and we have very good engineered solutions to mitigate that risk and really make it insignificant amount of risk. And so we have the liners, for example. We are, again, not storing a bunch of liquid under the ground. We continuously pump out the liquid. So I like to say that there's really nothing to leak. We're continuously pulling out the liquid as it comes in. And once a landfill is closed, or sections of it are closed, we put a cap on it. Again, that's required by the rules. And so no more rainfall can fall on it, and no more leachate is formed, in the long term. So it's not like a landfill leaches sometime distance in the future after it's closed. It's sealed, and it doesn't produce leachate. We still monitor leachate by law for 30 years. You have to pull it out. But in our closed landfills, we don't have leachate.
We unfortunately are out of time as we have to move on. The show goes by really quickly, I know. But, there are obviously a lot of people who are concerned about this, who want to share their opinion. What is the best, route for people to express their concerns, and how will the city ensure that some of these community concerns are being heard? Yeah,
thanks. So, we're just starting a pretty long process. There's going to be the EIS. There'll be community meetings about that. There'll be a chance to make comments. We're going to go to neighborhood boards. We're going to be at the North Shore Neighborhood Board in March, the Oahu Neighborhood Board in January, hopefully. So you could look for those agenda items or ask friends. If you're in the community, I think the word will get out. And then we're going to be starting kind of a long process of outreach and communication and education. And we want to do tours. We invite people. We want people to come and see our existing landfill. And you can I think it does give you a good feeling about its safety if you go look at it. And you can see the liners too, and you can see everything's there. So it's our job to educate and try to address the concern, find out what the actual concerns are, and then we'll address those.
Okay, Roger Babcock, thank you so much for being here. We hope this is the first of many conversations. You are welcome back. Okay.
Anytime. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Ernie Lau joins us after the break. Stay with us. You're watching Spotlight Now. Welcome back to Spotlight Now. We are continuing our conversation on the city's proposed site for a new landfill in central Oahu. Joining us now is Ernie Lau, Chief Engineer with the Board of Water Supply. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me again, Yunji and Ryan.
It's always great to see you. I'd love to get your reaction to what Roger Babcock shared with us. He's saying that there's a double liner. He's saying that this is a good site for this landfill. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts is once you build a landfill and you start to fill it with opala, and basically even after you cap it, it's there forever. It's like a forever facility. And it's loaded with potential contaminants. It's the rainwater that seeps through the landfill that poses the greatest risk to underground aquifers.
And tell us your specific concerns about this site in particular.
And this site is actually interesting you should ask, because we were presented this site as part of 6 sites that Dr. Babcock submitted to the Board of Water Supply back in 2022. And in November 2022, I issued a letter disapproving all 6 sites, including this site. So this site has already been disapproved, and the primary reason its location over a high-quality groundwater resource, the underground aquifer, that is a supply and could be a supply for drinking water in the future.
What is your response to the distance that they say, with 800 feet? They're saying it's a lot more significant than what was at Red Hill at 100. Do you think the distance provides any more protection and barrier and creates more of a buffer to make this a more safe location?
I think we've learned from the situation at Red Hill, and I almost think of this as like Red Hill number 2 that we're dealing with. But the issue of 800 feet of soil above the underground aquifer there in that location, the ground elevations are I think around 1,100 feet above sea level. The water surface, the top of the aquifer is about 169 or so feet above sea level. Even though you have that buffer, gravity is working against us. Every time it rains, that water eventually carrying the leachate or the chemicals from this landfill will continue to seep down, pulled by gravity down, and we know that 800 feet is not a sure buffer against contamination of the groundwater. We saw that with pineapple cultivation in the area, sugarcane cultivation, the use of pesticides 800, 900 feet above the aquifer itself, and we're still treating it today, treating the chemicals, some of the residual chemicals from those pesticides to remove them from drinking water to make it safe for our community.
What you said is very significant just now. You said that you look at this as Red Hill number 2. I want to get a little bit deeper on that. What I'm hearing you say is this site is an absolute no-go from the Board of Water Supply standpoint. Please elaborate.
It's a no-go, and I call it Red Hill number 2 because there are some parallels. As I get older, I kind of think about looking back in time and looking at history and the experiences and what lessons we can learn from history. So now go to Red Hill. The Navy decided, this is back in the 1940s, maybe the late 1930s, and an urban myth or an urban story is that they were at the Halekulani Hotel having breakfast or cocktails, and on the back of the napkin they kind of sketched out 20 vertical tanks to be built at Red Hill, which eventually got built. 80 years ago they thought it was a great idea, preparing for war in the Pacific. That would be fuel supply needed to fight that war. But then fast forward 80 years later, and you can see the mess that Red Hill has created for our environment and led to the contamination. They've built tanks with 1/4-inch steel plate liners that I've heard from admirals say it'll never leak again. This is after the 2014 leak. And what happened? It leaked multiple times. And it continues to leak, except that they removed most of the fuel out of there. So now think about this decision. This is being made, take us back 80, 90 years ago on the Red Hill. We're now at the beginning point where a decision on putting a landfill at this location. 80, 90, 100 years from now, are we going to regret this? Are we going to see the same kind of experiences, environmental impact of this large facility on our water resources? And the generations that have not even been born will have to deal with that.
I want to ask you about this announcement that came out from the city. Were you at all surprised that this announcement came out? We know that you were there in the room at the press conference and spoke at the press conference, which I thought was pretty interesting to have your viewpoint when the city is making this announcement. Talk about how much you knew about this prior to when the announcement was made, and the reaction of the administration and the Blangiardi team about your presence there in sharing your concerns.
You know, first of all, I want to say I have a lot of respect for the mayor. He's doing a lot of good things for the city. I'm part of the city government, the government team. On this matter, I just differ with the mayor. He decided to actually, on his part, reach out to me to invite me to this news conference, which it was totally unexpected because they kind of know where I'm going to come from, and I'm not going to change my position about protecting our Vai. But I respect the mayor for actually asking me there to even provide a somewhat contrary voice to what was being proposed. In terms of knowing about the site, the mayor mentioned at the press conference that Friday evening he kind of told me it's going to be someplace in Waihawa over the drinking water aquifer. I didn't know exactly what site. I didn't know until the actual press conference on December 10th. And it turned out, like I suspected at the conference, I think I might have verbalized that this might have been a site that we already looked at and rejected.
So my question to you is the same one I asked Director Babcock, which is, if not here, then where? Because we know that the topography of our island is such that we have a lot of sites that are over drinking water, and because of Act 73, we don't have a lot of latitude in terms of where a site like this should go. Should Act 73 be amended to make more sites available, or should we expand the current
Yunji,
landfill?
I'm not going to make comments on that kind of policy decisions by the legislature or by the administration. For my position, it's really about protecting drinking water because Olai Kawai, there is no life without clean water. And these water resources are finite. And if we don't protect them and care for them, if we don't practice aloha aina, if we don't care for the land and the land will care for us, care for the water and the water will care for us, then we are doomed. Our future is at risk. So in terms of a site, our suggestion has always been to look at locations not over a drinking water aquifer, and that happens to be within the 137 or so square miles in the coastal areas of the island, primarily over the Cap Rock. So those are locations that I think they should continue to look at. The other part of it too, and I've heard Roger's discussion too, is I think this challenge of opala, we all generate opala, and what we do with it is going to be important because we live on an island. We can't continue to place these types of facilities over our drinking water resources. But do we need to do more to reduce the volume, to do more recycle, reuse, to actually reduce the waste stream? Because we have to look at how do we as an island community be more sustainable in how we live here in this island, in harmony with our land and our water.
You know, I want to ask you about the current conditions right now and where things are on the west side, because when you look at the map that has been outlined that really shows where the aquifers are on the island, it looks like the current site and the current location is pretty close to an existing aquifer right now. Does the current site in landfill pose any threat to the drinking water, or is that a site that is not directly above? If you can expand on some of the concerns that people have about this current site.
So that current site at Waimanalo Gulch is right at the fringe of the no pass line. It actually is over a part of a basal aquifer in the area, but that is brackish water. We don't have any drinking water sources in the area. We don't have any intent to seek to develop drinking water at that location. So it's really at the border. So the no pass line is kind of a guide of where you can site landfills. Below that is the best. Close to that line, we'll look at additional data that might be available, hydrogeologic data. So that is I think the reason with the past administration, well before my time, made that decision to let that go.
You're in a very interesting position, as you noted, because of course you work very closely with the mayor in your role as the chief of the Board of Water Supplies, the chief engineer, and at the same time you're opposing him and his administration on a pretty big project. So what happens now? Will you be in those community meetings, you know, continuing to state this position? What will the Board of Water Supplies sort of next plan of action be to oppose this from coming to pass?
Well, we're going to make sure that we're available to the community if they want to hear our perspective. If we're invited to these meetings on the landfill that are being arranged by environmental services, we'd be glad to be there. I'll continue to work with the mayor on dealing with other issues, but on this one I respectfully have a different opinion. And my opinion is consistent with the Board of Water Supply's mission of providing safe, dependable, and affordable water service to our community. We've been doing this for 95 years, and it's because we have these groundwater resources. It's why our community can thrive.
We, of course, we brought you on here to talk about this proposed site, but there's so much that obviously you're also dealing with. So I quickly want to just pivot, if we can, to talk a little bit about what's going on with Red Hill. We know that the tanks have been drained, but the process continues. If you can update the viewing audience out there over where we're at right now in this defueling stage and any threats that it continues to pose to island residents.
Okay, so where they're at right now, and you can go to the Navy's Safe Waters website, the Navy Closure Task Force Red Hill, to get updates. They even have an app. They've actually in the process of cleaning out 4 tanks. I think they've completed 2. They're working on another 2. There are a total of 14 tanks that need to be cleaned out. There may be some residual sludge and fuel in the bottoms of the tanks, and then they basically pressure wash the entire interior of that 250-foot tall tank. The next steps will also be the removal of the pipelines. There are 3 large pipelines that go from the tanks inland about 3 miles all the way to Pearl Harbor. Those 3 pipes will be cut out and removed by the Navy's contractors. As they cut them out, they'll have to carefully remove any residual fuel that might still be sitting in the bottoms of those pipes as they take them out of the tunnel. So that's where they are in terms of that. And the final decision on the closure has not been agreed upon with the regulators yet. We're still monitoring the situation. What's happening at Red Hill right now is the focus on investigation and remediation. So the environmental cleanup, finding out where the plumes are located and how is it even possible to try to clean them or mitigate that.
You have been fairly critical of the information sharing that the Navy has been doing throughout this process. You wrote an editorial not that long ago with Na'alehu Anthony saying that the Navy needs to do more to right this situation. How have they been as a partner in this process in terms of sharing data with your agency, and what more would you like to see come from them?
Well, I'll just say right now the marriage is strained. They've been attacking us and trying to get the regulators to come after us to criticize that we're spreading misinformation. My simple response to that is if you think we're spreading incorrect information, then provide me the information to change my mind. Be transparent. Share that information with me freely instead of keeping it hidden or redacted. So that's my response to that. I think there's an opportunity here for them to become more transparent. The 80-year-old facility is destined for permanent closure. There's no longer a need to keep it secret on what the experience over the last 80 years has been with that facility in terms of what kind of fuels or chemicals were used there, what leaked out, when and where from the tanks or the pipes. They should just come free and come clean and disclose all of that to the community.
What about the future of the Halawa shaft? I mean, as we look at and we talk about the importance of preserving the aquifers that are left, and we talk about this landfill that's proposed for in the Wahiawa community, with the Halawa shaft and the impacts that has happened from Red Hill, do you foresee any future that system and that well and that aquifer could be brought back online to the Board of Water Supply?
Only after I'm sure that if I turn the pumps on at Halawa Shaft, and they can pump like 10 million gallons a day from that one location, that I won't draw fuel contaminated water and put it into the water system serving urban Honolulu all the way up to East Honolulu, Hawaii Kai. And then I also won't actually worsen the problem on the spread of the underground contaminants, the plumes, across Halawa Valley from the Red Hill facility. By inadvertently pumping it, will I be drawing it further westward and placing it maybe closer to other BWS wells that are located to the west of Halawa Shaft. So right now the short answer is it's not going to be turned on, and I don't have a timeline for when it'll be turned on.
One of the things that we had discussed in the past was looking for new wells and new water sources. How is that going?
It's hard. I'll just say that, my initial estimate was maybe 7 years to get a new well from the time that we picked the spot on the ground to drill the hole in the ground to the water and to test the water for the quantity and quality of the water that we're looking for. Instead of 7 years, I'm kind of now thinking it might be more 10 years to be able to accomplish that. There's just a lot of things that we have to do in terms of going through that process of getting the permits to be able to start even drilling.
And have you identified a site at all?
We've identified multiple sites in IAL, Newtown area to drill. We're also drilling sites further westward in the Waipahu area, going down into Eva.
Well, the other question that came up in the past and that we've discussed is who's paying for this? Because there is just obviously a price tag that comes with it. The Navy is taking responsibility for the cleanup efforts, but there are so many things that have caused the department to allocate resources to looking for other sites, to look for other sources for water. How has that been going in talks with the congressional delegation, getting federal support for this, and the overall budget that has been impacted by the Board of Water Supply?
So right now we're not getting any federal funds related to Red Hill impacts. We do have a Federal Tort Claims Act claim for $1.2 billion. That's still being reviewed by the U.S. Navy. They haven't rejected it yet, but if they do reject them, we'll have to decide how we proceed. By filing that claim, we have the option to file a lawsuit against the U.S. government on that issue. The decision has not been made. I want to be very clear. But we've preserved that option for us to try to recover some of the damages that Red Hill has created on the BWS and its customers.
In preparing for this interview, I think that there's a perception out there that the Red Hill issue is kind of settled, that the tanks have been drained, and that we are sort of in the clear when it comes to the toxicity of this facility. But can you tell us a little bit about the dangers of the current process and if our water supply is still being threatened as they clean out and dismantle the facility itself?
There is still risk while they're cleaning out and dismantling the facility. I mentioned about pressure washing each tank. In total, that's going to generate maybe 500,000 gallons of contaminated water. I've reminded the Navy to be very careful in handling to make sure that that doesn't spill into the environment, doesn't get spilled onto the ground, get into their drainage system and seep down and mobilize more fuel that's hung up below the bottoms of the tanks and the top of the aquifer. So they're trying to be careful with that. It's a lot lower risk right now from large leaks coming out of Red Hill. But the challenge is right now what's happened already with the past leaks and the damage to the environment, and trying to figure out how to clean that up. The pace of monitor wells development, I think they're challenged by getting landowner permission to do that. But we need to find a way to try to accelerate that and fill in the gaps where there are a general lack of monitor well or knowledge about what's happening underground. The problem with Red Hill right now at this phase, it's basically all underground. The issues are underground, and you know what happens when it's underground? It's out of sight, out of mind. And my fear over the long term, because this investigation remediation is going to take years, is that folks will eventually start to forget about it. And once we start to forget about it, then I think our U.S. military would be glad to try to close the chapter on that sad event.
Well, we are unfortunately almost out of time, but I just want to circle back as we conclude this conversation with you about this proposed site. Is there anything that the city can say or prove to you to convince you to think that this site might be okay if they maybe put in this, if they take care of certain sort of criterias that they've set or buffers? Is there any explanation or answer that they can give you to ease some of the concerns and maybe support the current location that they're proposing?
At this time, there is nothing I think that they can say to me about it, because I look at this landfill as a forever type of facility that'll be a forever threat to our water resources in the area. And will these engineered systems, these containment systems, last forever and not leak? And we saw things that happened in Waimanalo with intense rain that we could expect. They're moving from a dry location at Waimanalo Gulch to an area where it's some of the highest rainfall amounts on the island. So more rainfall equates to more millions of gallons of leachate. Waimanalo generates about 3.3 to 4 million gallons of leachate each year, depending on rainfall. Now you move to central Oahu, where rainfall is high. How much more leachate will be generated than would have to be dealt with? And that leachate, every single gallon of that leachate will be contaminated and is a threat to our water resources.
Ernie Lau, we always love having you on. You share so much with us. Thank you so much for being here.
No, thank you for this opportunity. I just want to make sure that the mayor understands that I respect him greatly for what he's doing. It takes a lot of courage to make these hard decisions, but in this matter, I stand in protection of our water resources.
Okay, thank you for being here. Steve Alm joins us after the break. Stay with us.
Thank you.
From the moment you wake up.
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live. We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahia.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahia for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
First alert traffic is like always having a helpful passenger right next to you.
There's a crash up ahead in the left lane.
When we see a backup, we'll tell you live on TV.
That doesn't look too good.
And send an alert to your phone.
I'll type, you drive.
First alert traffic on TV, streaming, and on the Hawaii News Now app.
Keeping you and your ohana safe.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Welcome back to Spotlight Now here on Hawaii News Now. Good to have you with us this afternoon. We are joined now by Honolulu City Prosecutor Steve Alm, switching gears, turning from the landfill now to public safety. Thanks for being here, sir.
Thank you for inviting me.
We always love having you on because you come with so much data. I see you have the charts there ready. Overall, just give us a sense when it comes to public safety in the city of County of Honolulu. How are we doing?
I think we're doing pretty good. I really do. And I think if you ask the average person on the street, is crime up, down, or the same, almost invariably they're going to say it's up. And it's just not true. The data doesn't bear it out.
Okay. When we look at crime, I think what makes a lot of headlines as of late is a lot of violent crime, especially involving young people and involving a lot of guns.
Yep.
What is your thought on why we're seeing what feels like an uptick, even if the numbers don't bear that out?
Right. Well, and that's absolutely true. In the first 11 months last year, there were 34 ghost guns recovered by HPD. This year, it's 84. And so that's a real concern. The murder rate is about the same, say on the west side, and that area's gotten a lot of attention in particular. But island-wide, it's down a little bit. We really are lucky in Hawaii that we have a low murder rate. When you compare it to other states, it's crazy. But some people will respond back to me saying, yeah, but the crimes these days are more outrageous or they're more brazen. And we have had acid thrown in the face. We've had a front loader crashing into a house. But back when I worked at the prosecutor's office the first time, there was a woman who patted a Godzilla doll on the head in a bar, and the owner took offense, and he literally stomped her to death. We had a serial killer operating back in the 80s. We had organized crime where they killed people, a bunch of people, and they buried some other people alive. So there always have been horrific crimes. So I think it's really important to look. So let me just give you a couple of examples. Island-wide, theft is down 14%. Motor vehicle theft down 15%. Burglary down 28%. Robbery 7%. Murder 11%. And I think it's fair to compare it to last year because COVID's over. When COVID numbers were there, it was down more, but now we're back to comparing. So overall, I think it's good news. That is island-wide. So your street may have more, your area may have some more, and if you're the victim of a crime, you don't care about statistics.
Another thing that we also hear more of is just more of these brazen crimes, where these robberies, where people are literally driving into stores or knocking down doors and aggressively taking and stealing from these establishments.
Yep.
Sometimes, a lot of times in town here as well. What would you say to that? Is that a concern, and how are you dealing with those types of crimes?
It definitely is a concern. I think I remember seeing one on TV where they reversed a stolen truck into, I think, an electric bike company. And then when the security guard showed up, they used a electric stun gun on him. Those kinds of things are terrible. We're happy to see more and more surveillance footage. 1984 is in the rearview mirror, but that really helps us solve a lot of crimes. And even though those are happening and we pay attention to them, overall robberies are down.
Okay, let's talk about those ghost gun statistics that you mentioned, 34 to 84 seized
Yep.
weapons. Are these guns that are being produced on island with 3D printers? Are these parts that are getting shipped here and then assembled?
It's all of the above. It's parts that are being assembled. It's people using 3D printers. Still, they're stolen guns, regular guns that are being used. So we would urge people, if you have guns at home, make sure they're in a secure place. Don't let your kids get a hold of them. And you can avoid these horrible situations where you have a 6-year-old shoots their 5-year-old brother, and certainly not meaning to, but it can happen. But that is a real concern. So I can tell you there will be more than one ghost gun bill at the legislature, both to get clear definitions of it. And we've seen situations where if the three of us were in a gang, you have part of the gun, you have part of the gun, I have part of the guns, we carry it around. And then at the last minute, we put it together and you have a ghost gun. But if they're caught before that, it's just, I just have a barrel. So we're trying, I know HPD is working on a bill. We're working on a bill in conjunction with the Kauai prosecutors, and we're trying to address that head on.
Speaking of legislative priorities, with the legislative session about a month away, are there any other pieces of legislation that you're going to be introducing and advocating for this coming session?
Okay, one that we're going to try to do is, a few years ago, the legislature passed a law that if you're 60 years or over and you're the victim of an assault, it becomes a felony. Because we're convinced people will target older people. They think they can take them, and they're going to be more vulnerable. What we're going to do and reintroduce the bill, because the challenge we had is the way it was written. It said the suspect knew or had reason to know the person was 60 years or over. And so honestly, people want to look good when they go to court. They're going to dress well, they're going to put on makeup, and so the question in court becomes, come on, ladies and gentlemen, you can't tell that person's 60 or over. So what we're going to do is try to make it 65, but make it a per se crime, strict liability. The other thing is we're going to fight the commercial marijuana again. There are very few things I think that would cause a day-to-day problem the way that would. And it would be low-income neighborhoods that would get the brunt of this, like liquor stores nationwide. And there's research showing that when you legalize it, it normalizes it. I think for teenagers, the use goes up 13%. For young adults, it's 22%. We're having enough trouble with, after COVID, getting kids caught up in school. The last thing we do is tell kids that it's safe, and they'll figure if the legislature legalized it, it must be safe. And a drug 20, 30 years ago that was 3% THC is not the same as one that's 30, 40, 50% with concentrates over 90.
I want to ask you also about these district exemptions, these geographic exemptions that have been quite successful in Waikiki. We
Yep.
know that it's also happening in downtown. My understanding is that there are expansions on the west side. Tell us a little bit about that, how that's working, and whether that's a good idea, because I think some of the concern with this is that people don't necessarily, who are committing crimes in Waikiki don't necessarily live there, but the west side is a little bit different.
Right. Well, for Waikiki, if they live there, they work there, or they're receiving treatment there, we don't even ask for it. But there are people that go there to cause trouble, and there's something about that location, whether that's where they drink or their criminal buddies hang out, So we're doing that in the other weed and seed sites. We're just starting to work more with our office, with the whole west side. So for some of the cases, exactly like you say, we're not going to ask for a geographic restriction. You don't want to kick people out of their homes. On the other hand, if somebody goes to the neighborhood to cause trouble, that would be a perfect use of it. So things are just getting started very slowly. There are a lot of good people out. I was at Christmas on the Ave this past weekend. It was great. The police have this blue light Christmas where they gave out more than 2,000 gifts to the kids. They're really trying to make sure their relationship is as positive as it can be with the kids.
Another issue that we continue to see, and it seems like this is at least once a month. I mean, that might be an exaggeration, it's just kind of my observation, is these illegal gaming rooms and just the crackdown of them, and that these still exist within the community. You've mentioned in the past that that was going to be a priority. Where do you think you are at the crackdown and continuing on in this effort to stop this illegal gaming facilities that we're seeing?
I think things are going really well. HPD, especially with Major Mike Lambert, is very aggressive. We have assigned a full-time deputy to work on these, and whether that's gambling charges, whether that's nuisance abatement. It's just people can make money at this. And the problem is they become centers for crime. We've prosecuted murders there. We've prosecuted drug cases, gun cases, and the like. So efforts will continue. A few months ago, Major Lambert was saying 60 game rooms had been shut down already. And part of it is just calling up the landlord and saying, we have done some investigation. You're using this as a game room. If you stop it right now, that's fine. Otherwise, it could be subject to forfeiture or you not being able to use it for a year if we file a lawsuit. So we'll keep pushing for that. It's a lot safer. You don't want to get caught in the crossfire at a game room.
Well, I want to ask you about illegal drivers. There have been a lot made, of course, after the Sarah Yara case, and she was hit by a driver who had multiple citations of violations and yet somehow was still out on the road. What is the update on that and making sure that dangerous drivers are not on our streets?
Well, what we had started to do was to ask for jail time for multiple people caught driving without license. The legislature last session passed a bill making a third offense a Class C felony. We're going to see how that goes and whether that's a real deterrent or not. And we just don't know. We're keeping statistics. But right now, if people are getting convicted in court of driving without license, they're getting fingerprinted at the courthouse. Because in order to prove identification later on, fingerprinting. Because most of the citations given for driving without license are citations. They're not arrests. Most of the time. And there are a lot of those cases. One thing that's bothered me here, as it has across the country, is people just walking into stores, grabbing stuff and leaving. To me, that's like a breakdown in society. You know, so we're working with the stores. We will prosecute it if you can identify somebody, even if you don't want to stop them. If you have surveillance footage or you can make ID on them, we can do the case. So we're trying to work with people, but that is a really disturbing trend in Hawaii and across the country.
I want to just ask about just the partnerships and the conversations that you're having both on the county and the state level when it comes to just law enforcement. We know that you have been working closely with HPD on just those areas of Waikiki and downtown and those communities, but also with just PSC and the, the facilities that we have currently in place and the overcrowding that we're hearing at the prison system. How are those conversations happening with all of these different agencies and departments? Because they all go hand in hand, from law enforcement to prosecution to the sentencing and detention. What is that conversation and collaboration like?
We have a great relationship with HPD. And, even at the same time, we investigate all the officer-involved shootings. And if we determined it wasn't lawful, we will charge or attempt to charge folks. But we deal with HPD and work together every single day, crimes all over the island. I also, because I was a federal prosecutor, I don't have any ownership issues about cases. If there can be a better bang for the buck or a more appropriate one, and the feds call us up and say, can we take this case, we'll say yes. And so we try to work together on that as much as possible. But we have a really good relationship, like I say, with the department. It's joint training. We meet regularly, point out issues, try to work together. And Jordan Lowe is a good guy at the Department of Law Enforcement, and he had a long federal career, but he's very active. He's very interested. I think we have really good cooperation among all the different law enforcement agencies, and I get along well with the mayor. I get along well with the governor. So it's real. I think that it's a good time for people to work together.
We are out of time, but we thank you for being here. Just briefly, you shared those statistics off the top about how crime is down, but that feeling doesn't necessarily permeate the community. What do you say to folks about how to be more actively involved in helping to stop these crimes in the first place?
Well, be careful of social media. Be careful of looking online repeatedly, because understand the crime rate is down. And so you should feel good about your community. People are being willing to testify. They're calling HPD if they see something. That is critically important. Even if it's anonymous, it gets them there. And support the mayor's and HPD's efforts to pay the officers more and retain them so more will stay. So many good things can happen if we have more police officers.
Okay, Steve, always good to talk to you. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this.
From the moment you wake up.
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live.
We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahia.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahia for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suchi. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, great conversation today, catching up, of course, with what's happening with the new proposed site for the Oahu landfill. You heard from both sides, the city's representatives saying that this is a place that they want to pursue, but you heard the pushback from Ernie Lau saying this is not something that he or the Board of Water Supply will advocate for.
Yeah, very, very stark comments from Ernie Lau there, saying that he sees this as a Red Hill Part 2. That is pretty strong language and stuff that I think the city will be taking seriously. There will be some community meetings. They're just starting this process, so expect to hear a lot more on this. Next week, it'll be Christmas Eve. We'll be talking about Hawaii's film and television industry, and we do hope you join us then.
We leave you now with a beautiful shot of Hilo Bay.